The World Cup is here. Millions of fans were expected to travel to the United States. Billions of dollars were expected to flow into the economy. Host cities spent years preparing for a tourism boom unlike anything they had seen before. Hotels increased capacity. Restaurants hired staff. Airlines added routes. Cities invested millions in transportation, security, and infrastructure. But as the world turns its attention toward football, another story is unfolding in the background. A story about immigration, a story about perception, and a story about whether America can successfully welcome the world while simultaneously carrying out one of the most visible immigration enforcement campaigns in recent memory. Because for many international visitors, this isn't just about football anymore. It's about visas, border checks, entry requirements, immigration enforcement, and the fear of spending thousands of dollars on a trip that may not go exactly as planned. The issue is something much more complicated. The issue is confidence, because tourism runs on confidence. Confidence that you'll be allowed to enter the country, confidence that your travel plans will go smoothly, confidence that you'll be welcomed when you arrive. And confidence can disappear much faster than people realize. If enough visitors begin questioning whether the trip is worth the hassle, the consequences could stretch far beyond football. Hotels lose customers, restaurants lose revenue, airlines lose passengers, tour operators lose business, host cities lose tourism dollars. And the economic boom that politicians and business leaders have been talking about for years suddenly looks a lot smaller. The irony is difficult to ignore. The United States spent years preparing to host the largest World Cup in history. Yet at the exact same moment, immigration enforcement has become one of the country's biggest headlines. And that raises a fascinating question. Can America successfully host the biggest sporting event on Earth while parts of the world are becoming increasingly nervous about traveling there? To answer that question, we need to understand what was at stake from the beginning, because the World Cup was never just about football. For FIFA, the tournament represented a massive expansion of its flagship event. 48 teams, more than 100 matches, a television audience measured in billions, the largest World Cup ever organized. But for host cities, the tournament represented something else entirely: money, lots of money. For years, economists, tourism officials, local governments, hotel operators, restaurants, airlines, and investors have been talking about the economic benefits of the tournament. The logic sounds simple. Millions of visitors arrive. They stay in hotels. They eat in restaurants. They use local transportation. They visit attractions. They buy merchandise. They attend matches. They spend money everywhere they go. And that spending creates jobs, generates tax revenue, and supports local businesses. At first glance, it sounds like a guaranteed success. After all, what could go wrong? Football fans love to travel. The World Cup is one of the most popular events on the planet, and the United States remains one of the world's most visited countries. But economists have a habit of asking uncomfortable questions. Questions that often get ignored during the excitement. Questions like, how many visitors will actually come? How much money will they actually spend? And what happens if the projections turn out to be too optimistic? Those questions matter because economic forecasts are based on assumptions, and assumptions don't always become reality. History is full of examples. Before almost every major sporting event, predictions of enormous economic benefits dominate the headlines. Cities expect tourism booms. Businesses prepare for record demand. Politicians celebrate future growth. Then reality arrives. Sometimes the benefits exceed expectations. Sometimes they fall short. And very often, the final outcome is far more complicated than the original headlines suggested. The 2026 World Cup is no different. Because while millions of visitors are expected, attracting visitors is not the same as guaranteeing visitors. Tourism is one of the most sensitive industries in the world. Small changes in perception can produce surprisingly large changes in behavior. A destination doesn't need to become dangerous to lose tourists. It only needs to become less attractive than the alternatives. And that's where immigration enters the story. Imagine you're a football fan living in Brazil, or Argentina, or Morocco, or Nigeria, or India. You've spent years dreaming about attending a World Cup. You finally have the opportunity. You start researching flights, hotels, tickets, transportation. Then your social media feed fills with stories about immigration raids, news reports about deportations, political debates about border security, videos of enforcement operations, discussions about visa delays, stories about travelers being questioned at airports, Whether those stories affect you personally almost becomes irrelevant because the question enters your mind. Is this really where I want to spend $5,000? That question alone can change behavior. And when millions of people start asking the same question, economists begin paying attention. Because the economic success of the World Cup depends on one thing above all else: people showing up. The challenge isn't that fans don't want to come. The challenge is that attending the World Cup is already expensive. Flights cost more than they did a few years ago. Hotels cost more. Food costs more. Transportation costs more. Match tickets cost more. For many families, attending the tournament requires a significant financial sacrifice. Now add uncertainty, add complicated visa procedures, add concerns about immigration enforcement, add negative headlines. Suddenly the decision becomes much harder. This is what economists call friction. And friction matters, not because it stops everyone from traveling, but because it discourages some people from traveling. The difference is important. The World Cup doesn't need half its visitors to stay home for economic projections to be affected. Even a relatively small decline can have meaningful consequences. Imagine 5% fewer visitors arrive than expected. At first glance, that doesn't sound dramatic. 5% seems small. But across millions of expected visitors, 5% becomes a very large number. That's thousands of hotel rooms left empty, thousands of flights that aren't booked, thousands of restaurant reservations that never happen, millions of dollars that never enter local economies, and that's before considering another challenge: visas. For many international visitors, obtaining permission to enter the United States isn't automatic. Applications need to be completed, appointments need to be scheduled, interviews need to be conducted, documentation needs to be reviewed, and in some cases, the process can take months. Now imagine you're planning a World Cup trip. You need certainty. You need to know whether you can travel. You need to know whether you can book flights. You need to know whether you should reserve a hotel. Uncertainty becomes a problem, not because people dislike paperwork, but because uncertainty makes planning difficult, and difficult planning often results in canceled plans. This concern existed long before the first match was played. Tourism experts repeatedly warned that visitor accessibility could play a major role in determining the tournament's economic impact, because the World Cup doesn't compete only with other sporting events. It competes with every travel destination on Earth. If attending becomes too complicated, too expensive, or too stressful, some people simply choose another vacation. And every person who chooses not to come represents money that never arrives. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of economics: perception. Many people assume economic decisions are driven entirely by facts. In reality, emotions play a huge role. People buy homes based on confidence. People invest based on confidence. People travel based on confidence. Confidence drives behavior, and behavior drives economies. That's why headlines matter. That's why social media matters. That's why public perception matters, because whether concerns are fully justified or not, they influence decisions, and decisions create economic consequences. This phenomenon has a name: the fear economy. When people become uncertain, they change their behavior. They spend less, travel less, take fewer risks, delay major purchases, choose safer options. The result is that economic activity slows, even if the underlying problem isn't as severe as people imagine. The World Cup is not immune to this effect. If enough potential visitors become hesitant, spending falls. Not because football suddenly became unpopular, but because uncertainty changed behavior. And uncertainty is difficult to measure. Economists can count hotel bookings, they can count airline tickets, they can count visitors, but they can't easily measure people who decided not to travel. The family that canceled a trip, the fan who chose to watch from home, the tourist who decided to visit another country instead. Those people disappear from the statistics, yet collectively, they can have a major impact. And that brings us to another important question: who actually benefits from the World Cup? Most people assume the answer is obvious: everyone benefits. But economics is rarely that simple. Some businesses benefit enormously. Hotels often see record occupancy rates. Restaurants experience increased demand. Airlines carry additional passengers. Entertainment venues attract more customers. For these industries, the World Cup can be extremely profitable, but not every business experiences the same benefit. Some companies see little difference. Some areas receive more visitors than others. And some economic benefits are far smaller than initial forecasts suggest. This is one reason economists remain cautious. They've seen these situations before. Major events generate excitement. Excitement generates projections. Projections generate expectations. And expectations sometimes become detached from reality. That's not because the event fails. It's because reality tends to be more complicated than forecasts. The World Cup will undoubtedly create economic activity. The real question is how much and whether it matches the promises made before the tournament began. Because beneath the football lies a story about tourism, a story about perception, and ultimately a story about trust. Trust that visitors will come. Trust that they'll spend money. Trust that the experience will meet expectations. Without that trust, the economic engine behind the World Cup becomes less powerful. This is why immigration has become part of the conversation. Not because immigration determines who wins football matches, not because ICE decides tournament results, but because immigration influences how people feel about traveling, and how people feel influences how they behave. That connection is what makes this story so fascinating. The World Cup was designed to bring the world together. Yet at the same moment, debates about borders, visas, immigration, enforcement, and national security are becoming increasingly visible. Two powerful forces moving in opposite directions, one encouraging global movement, the other emphasizing control over who enters the country. And somewhere in the middle are millions of football fans simply trying to attend a tournament. When the final whistle blows and the trophy is lifted, the football story will be easy to understand. There will be a winner. There will be a champion. There will be unforgettable moments. But the economic story will be much harder to measure. Economists will be studying tourism data, hotel occupancy rates, airline traffic, consumer spending, tax revenues, visitor numbers, and they'll be trying to answer a question that won't appear on any scoreboard. Did America receive the economic boost it expected? Or did immigration concerns quietly reduce the benefits before anyone noticed? Because the biggest threat to the economic success of the World Cup may not be on the pitch. It may not be transportation. It may not be stadium capacity. It may not even be football. It may be confidence. Confidence that visitors are welcome. Confidence that travel will be smooth. Confidence that the experience will be worth the investment. Because confidence is what turns projections into reality. And confidence is far easier to lose than it is to build. The World Cup may be remembered for goals, celebrations, and champions. But years from now, economists may remember it for something very different. A global sporting event that became an unexpected test of how immigration, perception, and tourism intersect in the modern economy. And if those concerns prove powerful enough to influence travel behavior, the most important statistic of World Cup 2026 may not be goals scored. It may be the billions of dollars that never arrived in the first place.